Be good now. Be good now. Hello, Jared.
Okay, we are live on YouTube. The view on YouTube is 180 degrees, so it doesn't get my good side, unfortunately. But okay, we are live on YouTube.
At least you have a good side.
And you can. Yeah. The view on YouTube is. You can hear that. I'm going to mute my YouTube audio. Okay.
I'm often late for regular meetings. You have less of an excuse when it's a Zoom meeting.
Well, you can always blame Xfinity or something like that.
It's hard to use
Polly.
traffic for that one.
Hey, Polly.
Hello.
Hello, Polly.
Wait, is that you or your daughter? You sound like a little kid.
Oh, no, I was eating something. I was like, oh, I better finish mine.
Which is good.
Yeah. John, you look all spiffed up.
You know, I'm at the office today. I know. I came in and losing my view of the Wasatch though. Now I've got a 5G tower next to the Taco Bell sign. So things are just slowly going downhill here.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah,
But yeah, I thought I'd clean up. It is Tuesday, once a week, you know.
I do it twice a pandemic.
Huh. Yeah.
I'm thinking of boxing up all my nice silk Italian silk ties and send them to my mother-in-law, who's a quilter, and just say, do something. I don't know what. Just never gonna need them again. So the way things are going.
They'll come back.
You had
All right,
a
Dave.
collection of Italian silk ties.
Yeah. And know anybody needs like 50? Exactly. Hey, Rob. Hey, Dave.
Hello there.
Niermeyer's probably just unloading his bike right now.
Polly, how was race season? Awkward?
No, it wasn't. It was, well, the hard thing was it was all in the middle of the week. And
Oh, that's right.
so it was kind of a bummer. But it was okay. My older one wasn't really into it very much. She's decided, we just laugh because, you know, we're die-hard skiers, me and my husband. And my older daughter is now decided she's into park and pipe. And my younger daughter has decided that she wants to snowboard. So it's like, we're still kind of doing winter sports, but like we're skiers, you know? We're like,
Have you ever threatened like to bind their feet like in the old days in China or something? I don't know.
yeah, exactly. So, but still it's fun. But we're like, even the one who wants to snowboard, we're like, you can snowboard, but you also have to ski. So
Yeah. I took my son, well, you've met my son. I took him up to Woodward for his birthday on Sunday. Now he's 11, knows everything even more. And I think he just wants to move next door to move into Woodward.
Yeah.
What is park and pipe, Polly?
Oh, it's
Park
like
and
a
pipe?
half pipe and then like the rails and the tricks and stuff, the jumps.
Sean White.
Sean White, yeah. So like a terrain park. It's like the last place I would ever consider going.
But now you go there every
Time. And then they go, I just
day.
go off what they call the knuckle. I go off
Oh,
the
yeah,
side.
yeah. Yeah, that's what I do too. Yeah, the knuckle. And my son, when he was younger, he didn't know it was a terrain. He called it the train park. And I go, you want to go where? Oh, terrain park. Okay. And that's all he does. If he didn't have a coach, he'd be at the train park. There's
John, how many days did you get in with your son this past winter?
Well, he got a lot of days in. I got a lot of days dropping him off. So I got about 20, I almost got maybe almost 30 days.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Paris.
Hello, Mayor. Hello, Jeff. Who'd I miss?
Well, it's 3:02. What does everybody think? Get after it, as they say, in the
Full
terrain
house.
park, in the train park.
Train park.
Launch it,
Send
send
it.
it. Should we
Send
send
it.
it? Send it. Let's send it. Okay. Well, welcome, everybody. It's been a while. It's been a while for me, and I know you all met. I had a conflict, but let's start with the formalities here. I need to read this for the record. Let's start the meeting, Chris. We are now starting the meeting of the April 27th, 2020 Town of Alta Planning Commission. A little after 3 o'clock. So determination regarding conducting Town of Alta public meetings without an anchor location. The chair of the Town of Alta Planning Commission hereby determines that conducting a meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location pursuant to Utah Code Section 52-4-207 (4) close parenthesis and Resolution 2020-R-12. The facts upon which this determination is based include the facts upon which the percent and number of positive COVID-19 cases in Utah has been significantly higher since May 27th, 2020. The 7-day average for cases on April 20th, as a date of this letter, 2020 is 375, with 24% of the state's cases in Salt Lake County. As of April 20th, 2021, there have been 2,174 deaths reported in Utah due to COVID-19. Therefore, this meeting will not have a physical anchor location. All attendees will connect remotely. Attendees may join the webinar by registering for the meeting through the town website, www.townofalta.com, or the meeting may be watched on YouTube, which is now live, Chris, if I recall. This determination will expire in 30 days. Yours truly, John Nepstead, Chair of the Town of Alta Planning Commission. Okay, got that out of the way. So, great to see everybody, virtual as it is, and I hope everybody had a enjoyable winter in spite of the oddities, and people got some skiing in and outdoor activities in, and you got to, if you were young enough to send it in the terrain park, I hope you got to do some sending, or just plain old launching wherever you may be. And I hope everybody has stayed safe, but also have been out and about and enjoyed Mother Nature. It's good we're getting together again, and I'm excited to have this meeting and have some ideas about some things moving forward. But let's start with the approval of the minutes from October 13th, 2020. My gosh, that's a long time ago. I was not able to make that, so I'll need a motion or any comments on the meeting minutes.
If there are no comments, I'll move to approve the minutes of that meeting.
Any comments? Let me give it a break with Zoom here. Let's make sure. Roger, do you have something?
I do. The last paragraph before section 4 said, Roger noted there are some issues with access to the parking area from Flagstaff and asked if they had considered busing there. And I sent a correction to Chris, and he suggested that the way we handle this was, you say it, Chris. How did you propose to handle this?
Roger, I think what I proposed was that you just make a comment about what you intended to say or what you did say, on the record in this meeting, and then the Planning Commission could consider that an amendment to the draft minutes and then vote to adopt those.
Can I just, it needs to reflect what you did say. So, but sometimes that is lined in with intent, but it can't be something new like that was said, but it should be just a clarification of the minutes, or we can also direct whoever did the minutes to go back and listen.
I'm pretty sure what is written is not what I said. Nor was it what I meant. But
Okay.
I believe what I said was that there were there were some issues of access to parking from the Rustler Lodge lift. And what follows, which had to do with Mike Mon saying he was going to work with Rustler Lodge to work that out, is consistent with that. So that's the only change that I think is appropriate.
And Roger did provide us a suggested edit, which in hindsight, I should have added to the draft minutes and then recirculated. Basically, Roger told John and I that it should say, Roger Burke noted that there were some issues with access to the parking area from the top of the Rustler Lodge.
To just clarify that, which is not really part of the minutes, when you get off at the top of the Rustler Lodge lift and early in the season, it's pretty hard to get up onto their driveway and then therefore onto the community center or the post office. So in fact, Rustler has taken the opportunity to close off the stairs and the access to that driveway. I don't know what's happened since then, but it's a problem.
As far as the minutes go, so really we're talking about not from Flagstaff, but Chris, you had, and Polly, I want to make sure the intent is good. With that, we can just change from Flagstaff to something else, right? Chris, you have it?
Yeah, I do. And I do. I mean, I have Roger's email, which specifies the sentence in the minutes that he wants to amend, and then what he proposes the sentence read. But I have not taken the time to add that into the draft minutes. I can do so and share a screen, and we can.
You want us to read the replacement sentence, and maybe we can adopt it. We can we can adopt that verbally for now, if we're good with it.
Yes. So the sentence in question is in the last paragraph of section 3 on page 2 of the minutes.
Right.
Sentence that Roger wants to amend states, Roger Burke noted that there were some issues with access to the parking area from Flagstaff, and he asked if they had considered busing there. And what Roger recommends it read is, Roger Burke noted that there were some issues with access to the parking area from the top of the Rustler Lodge chairlift.
Okay.
And that's certainly the case.
Okay, so we have a suggested change to the minutes that reflects that sentence. Instead of from Flagstaff, we would say from the top of what? Again, I'm sorry.
The Rustler Lodge chair.
Okay. All right, that's been a suggested edit. Any other comments on the minutes? Seeing none, how about a motion to accept as amended?
I'll revise my motion to accept the minutes as amended for Roger's email
Thank
and
you.
as
Is there a
discussed
second?
here.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. Let's move on. It's getting late in New York. Let's go on to, I know there was a community meeting, was it the 20th? The virtual open house last week on the community
right.
center. And how was the attendance on that online event? How'd that go, by the way? Is there a way to
I think
track
it was pretty good, right? John and Harris, I think we had almost 100 people.
Great.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah, I
great.
know that there were in the upper 50s on the not amongst the people who were participants, but attendees, maybe even more than that at times.
Nice. Nice. So, well, for those who didn't make it, I wasn't able to go online entirely. I did see some things later that Jen sent out, but we're going to have an overview. Is it the same presentation, Jarrett? Or is
Yeah,
it-
I pared it down a little bit.
Okay. All right.
But
So,
just in a
but anyway,
abridged
well,
version.
welcome Jarrett Pelletier from Enid Architects, and we've talked before, and so we're all anxious to get the update. So the floor is yours.
Great,
go ahead,
thanks.
Chris. Sorry. Go
Can I
ahead.
just interject for a moment? Jarrett, we
Yeah.
did have Masha from Enid register as an attendee
Okay.
of the meeting. If you would like her to participate, we can add her as a panelist and she can jump in if you would like.
I think that's okay.
Okay.
I think we're good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having us back to share with you where we've arrived over the past 6 or 8 months with the community center. Let me share my screen, make sure everyone can see this. As John mentioned, what we wanted to do is just give you a sort of abridged version of the presentation that we went through last week, the open house of sorts. I think the open house was great because it took a big step back and asked. We had Sarah Gibbs speak, we had Nikki Henderson speak, the mayor spoke about the need for a community center, and I think that was really helpful in kind of portraying the entire picture of why we're even embarking upon this process. We also had, in addition to myself, Don Weinrich, one of the partners from my firm, as well as Dan Cecil, who is our structural engineer. He spoke about the avalanche forces and how we designed for them. So if you haven't seen the video, I would urge you to take a look. There's also, we've updated and uploaded the complete feasibility study to the community center website, and I can show you how to access that. And that really sort of digs in much more deeply and presents a sort of holistic view of all of the things we've sort of uncovered and learned and done throughout this process, as well as all of the early conceptual studies and then more detailed studies. And it digs into structural analysis as well as sustainability aspects and targets. So I would urge you, if you're interested, to take a look through there. Let me full screen this for a second. So what I thought we could do is just we reviewed a couple of these last time we were together, but I always find them to be helpful reminders and kind of set the stage for talking about the community center. We pulled together these guiding principles very early on after conversations with the community, and we refined them through conversations with the advisory committee. And there really are marching orders in terms of the aspirations for the center. Projecting that it was a resource for the Alta community, for those members to gather for their well-being, both physical and mental and social, and also the aspiration that the place needed to tell the story of Alta, and that story being very broad, both its history and ecologies, but also about its sort of natural history, geology, history of skiing, and avalanche prevention. So we wanted to make sure that that was captured in terms of the vision for the center. And then the last two may be obvious, but I think worthwhile stating that the building needs to be both financially stable, sustainable, so that it's not a burden upon the town, and also environmentally sustainable, so that it's not a burden on its surroundings. Just a quick overview of the program. I won't go too far into it, but in broad strokes, we've worked with the community and the advisory committee to create a program for the community center, which is about 22,000 square feet. And that was based on all of our conversations, and then of course requirements from the town, and those requirements that we know that are needed to run a facility of such scale and magnitude, like loading and maintenance. So in broad strokes, really the heart of the community center is this idea of a lobby lounge, sort of central gathering place. And then around that, much like a town square, we sort of lined it with programs that are active, that are places where people can dart in and out. But that lounge becomes a kind of central binding space where you might bump into your neighbors. So there's a coffee shop, a small retail area, a changing art gallery, the post office. And then in and amongst all of that, we talked to the Alta Historical Society about actually displaying a lot of their artifacts and things, and creating an art program around the building that could begin to tell different aspects of the town and Little Cottonwood Canyon. And then there's this aspect of the center, which is about gathering and education. So you can see here, these bubbles are to scale. One of the things that was really a desire that came out of the community meetings and our conversations was what we call a multi-purpose hall. So it's a large flat floor, multi-purpose space that has drop-down partitions so that it can be subdivided. It wanted to be a place that the whole community could gather in for a lot of the programs that ACE and others run, but also be subdividable so that it could be programmed for other activities. One of the other aspects is that it could also be used as a conferencing center, so it could provide monetary support through rentals and things like that. So that was really a large driver of this gathering program. In addition to the multi-purpose hall, we talked about a space for wellness, a dedicated space for fitness and for yoga that was designed specifically for that. In addition, a space for ACE's education programs and their culinary education programs, a teaching kitchen, which could serve double duty and actually be used as a prep kitchen for the multi-purpose hall. The multi-purpose hall, to give you a sense of scale, is about 4,500 square feet. And we use a benchmark, which is sort of thinking about the scale of the footprint of Our Lady of Snows, which is about 1,300 square feet. So this multi-purpose hall is about 3.5 to 4 times the size of that. So it gives you a sense of the magnitude, but then it can be broken down and subdivided. The other important aspect of the community center that we determined really early was a potential replacement or permanent location for the Alta school. And we talked about with the advisory committee, all of the synergies that could happen by bringing the Alta school in the community center, among which, adjacency to the library's reading room, and how the school and the community center might share responsibilities of managing that and creating programs for that. In addition to all these other programs, there's lots of space that are needed to run the facility, and we've accounted for that. Some of those were provided by the town, such as a kind of apartment for police officers, and a sort of caretaker's residence for the facilities manager. But we've also programmed, ample space for mechanical, for maintenance, for loading, for restrooms, for circulation, all the things that you need to run a facility of that size. In addition, an office suite for the non-for-profit offices that we determined that has some small conferencing space as well. So program aside, one of the big drivers for the design of a building, as everyone knows, given the site's location, is how the building would resist an avalanche if and when it occurs, and not so much if but when and how often. So we worked with Stephen Clark and the Contour Group. They were a consultant to the town, but were fantastic to work with. They gave us all of their analytical information, and they actually were kind enough to work with us in our bi-weekly design meetings so that they could help advise us on, are we really doing the right thing here, and how do we deal with avalanche flow and force, and even, how do we manage more regular snow on the building. They provided a lot of help and insight. So this is just a quick slide. I'm not the right person to talk about this in detail, but just to show, where the community center site is, and their analysis is actually in a very high pressure impact zone. So it kind of should put things in perspective in terms of the scale and magnitude of the building structure that would be needed to be able to resist such a force, such a direct impact. So that really drove the design thinking from our side. For those of you who have come to some of the other community presentations and open houses, you probably heard me talk about this strategy, but this slide up on the screen is intended to give you a sense of our exploration. One of the things that we wanted to do sort of for ourselves was to learn about how to build in this place for such a massive force. So we thought about, we looked at, historical strategies for how mountain towns tend to deal with this. And we looked towards other ways to think about how we could manage that on the site. And we also thought about it relative to the building's cost and the sustainability of the building, because we understand that those are important issues for a community center for the town. It needs to be cost efficient. So you can see here on the left, what we call a baseline is what you would sort of tend to see, where the building is designed to directly take the impact of the avalanche. So you can see here, everyone I think is familiar with the building type. It's sort of encased in a large structural wall of concrete that's been designed with a lot of intention. The issue, or maybe not the issue, but this strategy, while tried and true, is also very expensive and very impactful in terms of its environmental footprint. You think about concrete as a driver of carbon use. So anything we can do to reduce the building structure, reduce the amount of concrete that it has or needs, the lighter of a carbon footprint it would have. So we looked at a range of ideas that range from embedding the building into the hillside, allowing the avalanche to flow over the top, to doing that, but actually extending the roof out and trying to create an outdoor space. There, we looked at trying to break the building up into fragments and sort of redirect the avalanche path in and around and through the building. And then we also looked at what would happen if we lifted the building out of the path of the avalanche. What does that do? And you can see on this scale, sort of very crudely, But there's a, there's a cost per square feet driver, and we, through our process and work over the past few months, have sort of proved out this kind of cost strategy. So those are all things to sort of keep in mind as I kind of go through this. We had a series of, yep.
Just ask a quick question. In addition to the snow mass, did you also look at wind velocities created by the avalanche blast?
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yep. That's a very good point. I am oversimplifying a little bit, but you are very correct. So we wanted to get folks' impression of those different ideas in terms of what that meant for how the community center might fit into its site. So we had a couple different community design presentations in the fall, which were well attended and really, really great. And I think this is just a snapshot of one of them. I see Chris. And they were really well attended, and I thought we got really good feedback and lots of good thoughts. And in that first initial outing where we showed folks this kind of broad range of ideas, something came out of it that we thought was really interesting and sort of unexpected, which was folks really gravitated towards this notion of embedding the building into the hill. They really wanted the building to sort of blend into the landscape. It wanted to feel natural. It wanted to have a certain scale to it. And there were certain aspects about this idea that folks really liked. But we had this great conversation between the embed and the lift. The other two sort of dropped away pretty quickly. But the lift generated a lot of conversation, maybe polarizing in some ways, because it sort of looked a little bit like a spaceship. It was kind of aggressive and out there. I think people thought it was a little too hard to believe. I think people thought it felt too different. It felt too, someone said it felt too much like Snowbird. It felt really kind of modern and kind of zooty, but didn't really respect the kind of attitude and it didn't incorporate elements of the landscape. So folks encourage us to move away from that idea. So we did, and it captured this quote. I think it really drove us in terms of how to think and develop the designs that, the town's greatest strength is its natural setting, and the community centers should respond to that and should accentuate that. And we really took that to heart. So we took that embedded concept, we developed it with the advisory committee. We tried to work to solve some of the problems that it had, how to manage snow. We had the roofs shedding into the highway. We didn't want to shed the snow into the highway. We wanted to create a flat roof that allowed us to maintain the snow, hold it back, so that regular snow didn't flow into the path of pedestrians. So we worked to design the scheme so that it could take all of those aspects that people liked. We planted it with a green roof. We designed it so it really blended into the hillside. And then we developed that. We developed that with our structural engineers and through the advising of the Contour group. And we costed it. One of the critical members of our team was Big D Construction, and they, attended all of our biweekly design sessions. So we got to hear from them issues of constructability, issues of maintenance, issues of practicality. They know what it takes to build here, so we really wanted to understand from them what makes sense, and we had them do a kind of full-on cost estimate for this concept. You can see here that cost estimate came at a premium. I think a lot of us were sort of surprised at what that premium was. At a really high cost per square feet, and one of the drivers of that was the structure, the superstructure of the building. If you think about it in that initial diagram I showed, having the building resist the impact or being under the path of the avalanche really requires those structural members to be sized to support that impact. And I think we were in the process of really understanding the magnitude of that impact. One of the analogies that the contractors told us is, we designed the building and it had, something like 6-foot steel girders to support the force because it was underneath and buried into the hill. And they actually had to go to they couldn't go to their regular steel contractor. They had to go to a bridge fabricator to be able to procure steel of that size and magnitude. And then getting it up the canyon was another issue. But one of the things, one of the other things that they expressed concern about, sorry, John, you want to go?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
When you get a pause.
Okay. One of the other things they expressed some concern about, in addition to the structure, was the long-term maintenance of the building. They expressed some concerns about, building on the downward slope of such a steep incline, and how water will infiltrate the building over time and become a potential maintenance concern for the center, in addition to sort of routing it around the building. But we still wanted to understand, this same concept, what it would mean to try to get this within a kind of reasonable budget that the town had set forth in the RFQ. So what we did was we took a look at that embedded concept and said, well, can we really tighten it? How much would we have to reduce it in terms of its footprint to fit within the kind of cost parameters that were established for the project? And we did that, and it turned into about 15%. So that was a little over 3,000 square feet that we would have to reduce out of the building in order to get it. It still has more or less the same cost per square foot. You're just building less. So the overall cost would go down. The other thing that we had to do was, if you see in this initial concept, because the community center sort of stretched the width of the entire site, more or less, we had to lift the building up and provide enclosed parking underneath it in order to meet the parking targets, which was to not take away any parking spots, keep everything that was there, but provide a modest number of additional spots for people who would work regularly in the community center. So that sort of doubling up of the structure also drove the cost as well. So in order to get this on budget, we would have to both reduce the footprint, but also take out that enclosed parking deck and look and see how we can get all of our parking on grade outside of the footprint.
Yeah, just a quick question for
Yeah.
you, Jared, and I'm sure
Please.
others have asked this. As far as the cost benefit, did Contour folks look at some mitigation strategies of the avalanche path itself, such as netting, things to reduce the return intervals, the severity and the intensity and the frequency, and do a cost benefit of, gosh, maybe we could keep the building a little bit bigger, reduce some of the structural cost if we had netting or some mitigation measures, permanent mitigation measures on that actual path itself, and look at it as an entire project from the starting zone all the way to the road. Well, I'm sure maybe those guys looked at that.
We discussed it early on. I don't know, John, if you want to jump in. I think where we landed, at least with the earliest conversations, was that we were trying to keep every piece of construction on the site.
And that's an important consideration, because there's only one of those off-site things, not counting the V's and towers and the Gas X's, but it's at a house at the top of the bypass road, and there's an avalanche fence, but that's on property owned by the ski area. It's complicated. Property in Salt Lake County owned by the ski area, protecting a private home down below in the town of Alta. It took a long time to get all the agreements and arrangements made. And then people had to certify that, you know, this fence has got to last for the normal lifetime of a house, which is 50 years. And in that area, it's mostly Forest Service and other private property. It's a totally different ballgame. So I'm not sure they could really.
Well, there's also the fence right there at the gate too, on the north side of the road. A little bit of fence.
That's the one.
Oh, okay. But I'm not sure. I'm not saying fencing is the way. I'm just wondering if if it was looked at from a holistic standpoint of whether it's fences or diversionary measures, just to slow the absorb the energy coming down the hill, that would have a trade-off with the building itself. But if that sounds like you guys kind of been there, done that.
And this is a really fun conversation. And as far as the GasXs and the Wiesen towers that do the gas explosions instead of military weapons, the DOT runs that through the state and the forest.
Right.
And they say, hey, when you're building a building, you got to build it as if we're not here.
Right. That's why I haven't brought up those exploders. I've been more permanent things on the ground.
And then we talked about those other permanent things. And if you talk about a diversion, I mean, if an avalanche comes down naturally and whacks your building or car or you, that's an act of nature. If we do something on the topo to divert a slide,
you pick up the liability of where it goes.
Our fault. So it's very difficult to get approval for that stuff.
I was just thinking of a way to absorb the energy coming down the hill. There are strategies to do that. I didn't know if it just didn't pan out. That's fine.
I think they did, and I think it didn't pan out.
Yeah.
But that's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so because of
can I just add a thought?
Yeah. Go ahead.
The land ownership would be problematic, as John pointed out there, John. But in addition to that, INEAD had another approach, and so you'll hear something about that too. So I think that rather than escalate commitment, so to speak, to the embed concept, they came up with an alternative.
So thanks, Harris. So one of the things that we did was we thought we could go back to this lifted concept because it dealt with a lot of issues of constructability, of the sort of depth and scale and magnitude of the structure, because it had because it has a lighter structure, it has a much lower carbon footprint. We could build with materials that are much more normative. We could even use wood, and fundamentally, and the contractors I think would agree with this. The occupied part of the building has less exposure to snow and to water. If you think about, buildings, as you all know, getting completely encased in snow and the snow melting over time, it has an impact to them. So this idea is really about pulling the building up out of that, setting it on pylons, and raising it to a height. And that was the height that we worked with Stephen Clark's group on, that he felt confident that the building would not be impacted by the avalanche. And I've got on my little diagram over here, Stephen educated us quite a bit, but we talked about, that the snowpack, you should always assume for a certain amount of snow being built up on the ground at all times. So he gave us the average, or a conservative approach to the average. So we assumed 10 feet. He also gave us a conservative approach to the flow, the kind of bulk of the pressure that would be coming down the hillside in the form of snow and other debris. And then the zone with what we called powder, which is much higher. So this, I don't have it labeled here, but that zone, that powder zone, I want to say is about 30 or 35 feet. So that's the kind of part of that gets kicked up as the snow and debris is coming down the mountainside. And what we learned by studying that section was that all the greatest of the impact pressures were in the flow zone. But as soon as you come out of the flow zone and into the powder zone, the impact pressures are much more normative and much more manageable. So we did a little bit more due diligence on this concept, and we wanted to make sure that we addressed the concerns that we heard in those initial community outings. You know, that the building didn't respond to the landscape. It was kind of dark and ominous and austere, and that it didn't feel like it fit in. It didn't feel like it was, you know, it kind of had the ease of the you know, sort of the place, the quality of the place. The other thing that was also a kind of additional benefit, and we had a lot of trouble with the embedded concept, was trying to get daylight and views from every space. You can imagine sort of building into the hill, right? One of your facades and probably a third on either side are completely, you know, below ground. So we worked the plan as much as we could to try to get as much bar light and views as we could, but you didn't get that to every space. But by lifting the building up, you're able to have views and light from every single space in that building. So that was another really positive aspect of that concept. And you can see here that reflected in the cost estimate, that the cost of the lift concept is lower by quite a bit. And we did the same. We went through the same process. We did a design package, we designed structure, we put together a narrative, and then we asked Big D to provide us with pricing. So we feel pretty good about those numbers. And what that allowed us to do also, is for this cost price, we're able to get the entire program that was requested, the entire 22,000 square feet, for a kind of budget that the town thought was reasonable target. So let me take you through where we landed with this idea. John, you wanna say something?
No, I'm just
okay.
readjusting so I can see better.
On the edge of your seat. Okay.
Always.
So one of the things we started to do was to think about how we could respond to this quote that was really guiding us, which is about responding to the landscape. So how could we evolve that lifted idea and make it respond to the landscape, and make it create a relationship with it. So as everyone knows who's been by the site isn't a uniform slope. The site actually has a hill, and it's got topography, and it has a valley. So what we wanted to do was we thought about how to sort of actually take that lifted idea, sort of drag it out, make it a little bit more horizontal, but actually follow the natural topography of the site, which has a lot of benefits. It pulls it off of the street, and it starts to create a roof line and a profile that starts to be reflective of the silhouette of the valley. This starts to give you a sense of the scale of that. So you can see here, we've sort of extended it out. It almost runs end to end of the community center site. But because it's lifted up, everything underneath it is accessible for parking, and I can show you that. So again, one of the sort of bonuses of this idea is that it pulls the building sort of back up slope a bit, so it's really off of Little Cottonwood Canyon Road. The other thing that was a really kind of positive value add, as I mentioned, every single space has direct access to light and views, and in fact, the views, especially at the ends, are just phenomenal. And we can show you what those start to look like. As I mentioned, the building is up on piers, a series of piers. You can see here, the piers are spaced at 65 feet. So there's quite a lot of space between the piers. And we designed that with intention and in concert with Stephen's group, thinking about the type and scale of debris that would be likely coming down the hill in the case of an avalanche. So there's a lot of intention in the spacing, but you can see street level parking below the building. You might ask, how do you get up to the building if it's up there, held up in the air? Well, one of the other things that we thought was positive, or we heard as positive about the embedded scheme, is that folks like this idea of a kind of entry plaza space. There's a kind of an outdoor sort of town square that you could use to hold outdoor events and to gather when the weather is good, and also sort of pulls the entry off of the highway there, so it feels a little bit better. What we did here was we built up a small platform that we're calling the entry plaza, and from there you have access to an elevator and a stair. So that's how you would come up. One of the other sort of positives, I think, is by bringing the plaza sort of down closer to the street level, it's actually much more accessible and useful, I think, as a trailhead. And as a kind of gathering space and departure point for backcountry skiers was one of our targets. So we're hoping that these stairs here could connect up into the existing trail network upslope. So kind of thinking about having a place here that's at the entry. Oops, that's not the right one. Oh boy, I've got the wrong plan here. Sorry. Give me 1 second. So just like in the embedded scheme, one of the things that we had learned from the initial outing was this idea of having a kind of lobby lounge, a sort of heart for the community center. And the idea here is still the same. So you would come up via the elevator, you come off the elevator into an information desk and have access to what we call the lobby lounge. Around that lounge, again, much like a town square, has all of these programs: the post office, the cafe, ACE programs, the multi-purpose room. On the other side, kind of added benefit, I think we did was we located the Alta school facing west down the canyon, which, if you can imagine those views, quite inspirational, looking back down the canyon into the vista there. One of the reasons we located at the end is it actually allows them to have dedicated access from the elevator, so they don't have to sort of cross paths with sort of day-to-day user of the community center. They could have dedicated access to a stair, and restrooms was one of their requests. One of the other sort of niceties of the lifting idea, and one of the things we took out of the initial lift concept, was a kind of roof terrace, which had some challenges and maintenance concerns, but we really wanted to be able to give the community center an outdoor space up high. So what we've done here is we've designed an outdoor porch, which runs the length of the community center. And you can imagine during the months of the year that have great weather, you could open sort of terrace doors up, have indoor outdoor gatherings. But then also one of the other sort of added benefits is that porch is much more easily accessed to maintain from the perspective of snow during the winter. So this has quite a bit of space to be able to get in there and to clear it off, and to make sure to get rid of any debris or ice that might build up over time. Kind of working my way down the plan: the wellness room, the fitness area, the non-for-profit offices, the service apartments. All of this entire southern face we imagine to be glazing. So you can see how each and every one of these rooms gets borrowed light from that approach. That glazing wraps around the corner, so these spaces at either end have really great views. Upslope, because that's where the avalanche forces are coming down, we want to be much more careful about introducing glazing and openings. So our strategy there is to do it really only when we need it, and probably do it in a very small, kind of modest way. So we've been thinking about, in strategic areas, some clerestory lights to give light to the service apartments, perhaps give another clerestory light to the multi-purpose room, but really strategic, because they would have to be designed for a different level of impact. So let me go back to full screen if I can. These are just enlargements. I won't take you through those, but what I wanted to do was to show you what this space starts to feel like from the interior. So this section shows how the community center is lifted above the ground. So you can see here, this is cut looking west. So you can see down the valley here, it's cut through the multi-purpose room. So, you know, the intention of having that slope come underneath the building, having the building raised up, parking underneath it, a kind of definition or paving zone. So you understand where the property line begins and where the highway begins. You can start to see the idea of the porch here, the roof, the simply pitched roof, which we imagine to be like a standing seam metal or something like that. So it very easily sheds snow to the upslope portion where it can be managed and removed. And then you can start to see here how, you know, again, daylight and views from each and every space, this being cut through the multi-purpose space. A view here at that sort of lobby lounge where you come in, sort of scaled, you know, much like a sort of a town center. It feels warm, fireplace, an information display. But you also get a sense of how the view from that space might feel looking south. A view at the Alta school at the end there with two sort of windows of glass looking out here to the south of the canyon, and you can imagine the views looking back down the valley. We begin to think about how the shape of the roof might begin to respond to some of those programs, so we get a little bit more height in the classroom or in the multi-purpose space here, where again you can see getting borrowed light through a glass wall. You can see here, this is when it's fully open, there'd be drop-down partitions which could subdivide it. The fitness space, again, with views and access to light. And then a kind of beginning of a view of what that might start to feel like. This is looking towards the east. You can see the building lifted up. One of the things we wanted to do is, you know, begin to express the topography and the silhouette of the mountain with the shaping of the roof, with the shaping of the building, begin to respond to the concern about it feeling dark. We are showing it here with a much lighter color metal that you could imagine sort of begins to take on the color of the sky or the color of the landscape, depending on the light conditions. And also begin to show how it could be constructed out of wood and actually have a really kind of warm feeling as you look up at it and see that this underside here, which sort of invites you up and in. You can start to see here a view of that entry plaza that I mentioned, where you would have access to trailhead, to the restrooms, to some environmental graphics, but also up to the trail network. The elevator, the stairs are sort of hidden in here. One of the things we tried to do here a little bit differently was to actually kind of open the piers up so they weren't entirely solid. They were really solid before, and we felt like they were giving this kind of impression of austerity. So here we sort of broke them into components so you can get more transparency, a sense of what that might start to feel like, you know, in the snow, how lifting the building up sort of keeps it out of the regular snowpack. And then, you know, again here from the other side, just starting to look at how that building form and the porch might start to really sort of reinforce a kind of center of town.
Jared, do you mind going back a slide, please? Sorry.
Sure, you bet. This one?
The snow slide, the snow one.
Oh, you bet. Yep.
I can't help but think that some people are going to say, okay, so I'm here under the shelter. Where's the bus? When's the bus going to pick me up? I know that's not part of the program, but it sure, this visual right here looks like a great spot for a bus to pull up. We're in a protected area. Have you, I know, and again, it's not part of the program, it's not part of the idea, but has that been brought up in terms of, geez, could it be at some point a mobility hub, incorporate some facets of a mobility hub into this?
Do you want to take that, Harris? I can jump into.
So there's been talk about the opposite side as a place for a mobility hub across the Highway 210. And after the presentation last week, I got a call from Chris McCandless, who has put forth one of the options for transportation of the gondola.
Right.
And he was pretty excited about having the top station of the gondola opposite this building and have a design that was complementary to this building. It would be lower, but across the street.
We did talk really early on with the folks at UDOT who were doing the environmental impact study, because we wanted to understand, could the community center also be this sort of mobility hut? And at least from the perspective of buses, what we learned pretty quickly was the scale and magnitude and size of a mobility hut that you would need to service the frequency of buses and the quantity of people would just dwarf the community center. It was when we looked at that initially, it was basically a similar size and scale just for that purpose.
Right, just for that, right?
Yeah. So that's really the kind of end of what I have here. These are just more views, just getting in a little bit closer, looking at that outdoor, plaza and how we could start to enliven that with some, information for folks, some environmental graphics to teach them about the place who might be coming for the day to hike, or even for backcountry skiers. And then you can start to see here an idea about an elevator that could take you up that's sort of celebrated, but really trying to get a kind of open, active plaza space that really could be used for many different things, throughout the year for various community functions. And then our last shot is just of the kind of porch, or the idea of the porch, which just has this kind of amazing views down the canyon, which could be a great asset. I did mention that we do have the website if folks are interested in looking at this longer or in more detail, that has all of the imagery and descriptions, as well as a link to our PDF report. So it goes into all of the detail of all of the community conversations that we've had, all of the program, all of the sort of analyses, the structure, sustainability, all of that is located in there, all of the detailed drawings, plans, sections. So feel free to take a look at that and give us any feedback.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
We had some questions along the way for Jared or others.
Yeah, I was looking at that site this morning, and I was surprised that the slides weren't the same as the ones that you presented last week or today. One of the things that struck me was that it was easy to spot was that the cost numbers were quite different. And I don't know if I'm just looking at an old version, but it's the one that popped up when I first encountered it.
Which one? Which cost numbers, Roger? The cost per square feet that are in here?
Yes.
I should.
Yeah, I think it showed the embed was like 500 for something like $500 per square foot, and the lift was
I know what you're
Right.
talking about. That was in the
Okay.
report, right? That was so. What we did initially in the report was we looked at all of those different ideas and we asked the contractors to help us determine what they thought a reasonable cost per square foot was for that concept. But that was done before doing a full-blown cost estimate, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So
No, my point was that it's what I was seeing isn't current. And
correct.
I mean, I
Correct.
presume what you have on the screen right now is current.
Yes. Yes. Sorry about that. If there's any confusion.
And I have
Well,
another question.
I think that what happened was that the embed turned out, the cost estimate for the lift is not too far off. You suggest 500 to 700 square feet were your initial expectations, and you're at the upper end of that. The big difference is in the embed, because this was a speculation before you recognized how much concrete would have to be poured.
That's exactly right. That was us in conversations, because estimating these things takes a lot of folks' time and effort, and so these numbers are based on a design drawings that were put out on the street and had subcontractors giving them pricing. The earlier numbers that Harris, you're referring to were a rough order of magnitude kind of first guess at it to give us some guidance and to help us.
Another question I had was, I wonder if anybody, not necessarily you, Jared, but any of us here have seen this kind of lift concept as a way of avoiding avalanches for a building. I mean, it's clear that it works for cableways, but I've never seen one like this. Has anybody else?
The only thing I've seen is the town's, the consultant out of British Columbia who did some of the avalanche work, Alan Jones, if many of you remember Alan. He did some work on a bridge for Washington DOT, Roger, but obviously it wasn't a habitable building, but some pretty detailed analysis of the snow blast, et cetera, that was brought up earlier. But I haven't seen it in a building, but I've seen it in a bridge.
Well, it occurs to me that this looking at the picture we have on the screen now, this where the words flow and snowpack occur, that's going to get filled up with snow before you have an avalanche, and that's not going to be an open channel the way it's suggested here. But it's, I mean, if you look at the north side of any building in town, it's got a lot of snow behind it, and it's not easy to get it out of there. But I was also on this topic, I was kind of intrigued by the Contour group who you engaged in this. I like their style in the sense that there's some young, well-educated professionals. And the good thing about that class of individual is that they don't know what's impossible, so they just go ahead and do it anyway. And I know that because I used to be one. And that was more than a half a century ago. And so, sometimes it works out. When you don't know it's impossible, you just find out that it is possible. At the same time, boy, I would think that this kind of scheme ought to be looked at by some of the graybeards in our community who've had a lot of experience with avalanches in the Wasatch and Alta in particular. I'm thinking of Liam and Titus and Jim Collinson, Binks, if we could bring him back to life, would be, I don't know if you've availed yourself of any of those, what do I describe as graybeards, but I think it'd be worthwhile to have them take a look at this.
So I imagine there'll be a peer review, and before this ever gets any too much further, Jarrett, there'll be a QC process and maybe a peer review as you get further along, I'm assuming. So I think those things will occur.
Absolutely. Let me go to my very last slide. Hopefully I left it in here, which is a schedule. So, you know, we're contracted for the feasibility study and kind of analysis of this. But then there's an entire very rigorous design process that would have to occur sort of following any funding of the project. So you know, we've got that at 9 months. That's pretty tight. These things usually take a bit longer than that. So I yes, to answer your question, absolutely. There would need to be a lot more, you know, engineering and detail and development on this concept, or any concept at this level. But we're charged with is sort of bringing it to a point that you understand what's possible and you know what the community wants and what it costs.
Jarrett, I think you guys did a great job. Certainly lots of constraints on the site. So everywhere you turn, you're looking at a sort of condition that makes it impossible to build there. So certainly appreciate that effort. The lift concept, you know, maybe the efficiency is good. I think obviously the part you recognize is sort of the disconnection with like the pedestrian off the street kind of ground plane stuff. And so it's kind of a hard concept to embrace from that perspective, but the sort of spectacular architectural element is very cool. And so it does have the merit there, just is very apparent on the landscape. And obviously you got a lot of feedback about that. So I think it is a tricky row to hoe on this site. So I don't know that there's, you know, I think I saw I was able to look at the full study this morning, and there was some, you know, indication maybe that was the preferred one, was the elevated or the lift. Was that okay. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I think it has a lot of sort of architectural, you know, flair and certainly presence, and could be very cool. It just, the elevation required to be above it all makes it above it all. So it does have the disconnection from the site.
I think that's absolutely right. And if this concept would move forward, that's something that you'd have to really sort of design through, right? Is what is that pedestrian experience like?
The other thing I like that you had in your study was the idea about resiliency. Maybe this is a center for some of that, and you know, maybe taking some steps on leadership in terms of sustainability, you know, as well, would all be things that are the right thing to do, that may not help the, you know, per square foot number that we're looking at. It certainly would be a headwind, but something that I think the community would think is worthwhile.
Can I just add a couple of thoughts? It is definitely disconnected from the pedestrian experience, but it is also the case that you're not looking out at the highway this way, with the traffic being in front of you. One of the discouraging aspects of Alta that I hear about is how prominent Highway 210 is. And, you know, our site happens to be adjacent to it. So that was one reason for preferring this. The second reason for preferring this, from my point of view, is the light and the effect on the school and frankly, the mental health aspects of having the light. And then the third aspect of this that really caught my attention was, I sit on the CWC, and we have these discussions about transportation, and there's this question about avalanche sheds versus getting up, as Roger mentioned, a cableway. You can have much smaller footprints. You can put the towers outside of an avalanche zone and be over it, so you don't need sheds. So you don't need all that concrete. And one of the things I said last week was Alta's history is dig a hole, get in the hole, and then have your house wiped out by an avalanche anyway. And that's the 19th and early 20th century history of Alta. And part of what appealed to me about this is they're actually moving to the 21st century rather than looking back to the 19th century or the 20th century in terms of digging a hole and being in it or using a lot of concrete, which strikes me as a little bit old-fashioned. But there's no question that there would be there would need to be a marketing campaign, no question about it.
Harris, from time to time, I see some open space that's proposed for construction that has essentially a kind of a skeleton of the proposed building, so you can get an idea of what the height is and what how much blockage it's going to be and so forth. And it's usually such that neighbors can see what's proposed there. I think it would be very instructive to have something like that erected. These are, quite inexpensive. They're just 2x4s and ribbons, you might say, to give you a sense of what the size and visual impact of this thing is, because this is really quite a different scale of anything else that's on the uphill side, particularly with this elevated structure.
What is the from the road to the top of that building? What is that number?
Oh, to the top of the building? To the underside is about 40 feet. So to the top is about 60 feet. Roger, one of the things we were talking about doing is a, potential next step would be building a model. I think, a full-scale mock-up is tough, but a large-scale model that's got context, might give you a better sense for how it feels.
Yeah, I expect to go to the town council at the next town council meeting when we, and it's actually we're working on the draft for the 2021 budget, which needs to be reconciled now that we're toward the end of the year. And there's the fee that we paid to INEAD was, or have you received the money yet, Jared? I don't know, or that we owe INEAD maybe. Came from impact funds, not from the general fund, and there's still some money in that, and that needs to be spent before too long in any case. And this was a legitimate legal use of the money, and so we are. I'm going to propose to the town council that we engage INEAD for the next step, which would be building the model, or we have a new purchasing policy, so I'd have to check and just make sure that I may have to get some other proposals from other potential model builders too, but it would be kind of a package that would allow people to see what it is that we were talking about.
So I'm trying to envision what the transaction between Rob and Jared here. So this is basically the top 2 floors of a 6-story building above the road. Do I have that right?
Roger, sometimes what we do is we call it flying a balloon, you know, as long as it's not too terribly windy or whatever, you can get a sense of building heights by, you know, flying balloons up building corners or whatever. So if we got more.
We've done that recently, if I recall.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did that at Sackler's house. We could do it.
I think that
I was going to mention it, even though I knew I shouldn't, because then we'd end up having to do that. But yeah, we could do the balloon thing.
yeah, I think that'd be, I mean, there's nothing that in my mind substitutes from having a real representation in the real place to get an idea of what this thing is about.
Okay, well, good. I know we've got some other agenda. Anything else for Jarrett while we've got him? And thank you again. I know it's getting late there, and this is fantastic work. And I know you've put a lot into it for to address, as Dave said, there's no easy way. It's not an easy site. We've got every hazard, just about every hazard out there involved. Just don't need have any tornadoes or anything. But, yeah.
Only John and I are used to tornadoes.
Yes.
But, I just want to butt in to say, ENIAD was done a month ago. But you know, the real numbers of the embed and the other and the lift, well, the real numbers for the embed and the lift people thought was too square and ugly. But ENIAD chose to continue working basically for nothing to finesse both designs so that the cost would come down and the lift would look better. So they did that, and it's been really good.
No,
So,
no.
yeah,
I'm
these
surprised
years-
they didn't rename the
these other
embed
two
into the bunker. It's more like the bunker alternative. But anyway, no,
And one of the principals in ENIAD said, you know, you could try to design a building to withstand, and the engineer had said 98 million pounds of avalanche debris coming down the hill for a 73 million pound building. That's kind of crazy. Or you could be like a bullfighter and just get out of the way.
right.
So that's where the lift started to become a lot more attractive.
No, thank you.
I
Well,
don't
thank
know
you.
if it's in the report that's online, Jarrett, but the engineer's report about the relative seismic versus avalanche risk here was really quite striking. Two orders of magnitude difference.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's in there, Harris, but we'll add it in there. I think
It
it's
was,
a good
it was
point.
pretty
It's very
striking.
telling.
Yeah, no. Well, they don't have those in the Catskills, or
No.
I guess that's why the Forest Service gave us this piece of property, because it knew that nobody would ever be able to do anything with it. And I also want to just say thanks again to Jarrett in front of this group, because, you know, I think that they take on projects that they learn from. They have a whole division that does that intentionally. And I'm pretty sure that was part of the appeal here. Plus they had a relationship with Utah, because they did the Utah Museum, the Natural History Museum of Utah buildings. So they had already been out here and knew the place. But anyway, Jarrett, thanks a lot. And thanks again
Right.
for taking this
yeah,
time.
thank you.
You bet. Thank you, everyone. Good to
All
see
right,
everyone.
thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
Take care.
Right.
Yes, thanks, Jared.
Good
Hello,
night.
goodbye, Masha.
Moving along, thank you. That was good. And maybe as far as keeping the planning commission informed along the way, maybe, just, I don't know if we need a standing agenda item as far as the fundraising and things like that, as far as progression, but I think all of us are certainly interested and care a lot about how this moves forward. So we can take that as, we can figure that out along the way, but it's great to see things on paper.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
without belaboring the avalanche thing, I mean, when was the last slide that actually came down in that area? Does anybody remember that?
I don't remember that specific area. I do remember one just a little bit west.
We would have that in the town
But-
in that avalanche study that Alan Jones did. We have that data. And I think that was that was supplied to that team as far as the frequency and the et cetera. But I know that's been recorded in that previous, I'm pretty sure, Rob, in that previous study. So, okay, moving
Sorry,
along.
distracted.
So
Now, just quickly,
oh, yep,
can I butt in here for 2 seconds?
sure.
I have no manners, even though I'm from the Midwest, I still don't have any manners. Jeff Niermeyer had mentioned a while ago, had questioned the Planning Commission's role at this point. Well, first, I mean, even at the beginning of this, it's like, it would have been great. I mean, it was good that you were involved to see what was happening and then throw in any input or questions or problems you might have with any proposed design. But what's going to happen if we get the money and as we get further along, we're either going to have to get the Forest Service to flag 49 acres, which we talked about, not we, but which we had talked about with the Forest Service in the town a number of years ago, so that this parcel would look like a 50-acre site. So if they encumbered 49 more acres to this 1.2 acre site, then we could treat a zone, which requires 50 acres. And then we could do exactly what NEAD has proposed, basically with no further changes. If we can't get the Forest Service to agree to that, and that was like 3 district rangers ago, then we'll be looking at a rezoning, which will go through you, which we'd have to lay out the parameters of I mean, it's got the right minimum size for the commercial core area, a little over an acre. So we'd have to lay out the parameters of height, coverage, setback, and things like that. So this will come to you in the future for specific public hearings and review and design standards for the zone.
So at some point, what
So
you're saying, John, is the town will be the applicant.
Yep. Yes, and we kind of want to follow the correct procedures. I have to say that because Polly's still here. But yeah, we will do it one way or the other, and it will come back to you. And, we're under the microscope, so we'll do it right. We have a couple of choices, and we'll find out what those are as we move along. And I might also say that
Park City's doing that with their arts district. So yeah, they're the developer and they're the they're the applicant and the reviewer and the approver. So
perfect.
Okay. Continuation of dark skies. But there's been a lot in the news about dark skies. There was something on the radio this morning, and some of I'm sure some of your travels lately, more and more dark skies out there. It's getting. I'm glad we've started these discussions a while ago. So I don't think we're behind by any stretch, but let's talk about. Is Mr. Mendoza available, Chris? Where are we on?
To be very, very brief.
He's not.
He signed on at 3:30, thinking that he could go quickly from 3:30 to maybe 4.
Oh, I didn't.
And he just texted me, he's off, he's gone.
Okay.
So Daniel Mendoza is the director of the Dark Sky program, Dark Sky minor program in the planning department of the University of Utah. And we have done a couple of, we did one assessment in November, just before Thanksgiving, using a drone. The drone crashed and all the data, we only got 2 sites before the drone crashed. All the data we got is embedded in the drone. And it's probably my fault, but he's not going to be able to use another drone for a while. At any rate, we went up on April 12th, on Monday night, and did handheld on the ground assessments of about 9 spots. And he started to lay things out, and he was going to talk about where we are and give us some ideas about how that would relate to a dark sky community, and then throw out options that we could look at for moving forward. But he's not here, so we could do that in our next meeting. So we are making progress. We are thinking about this. We're engaged. He's into working with the town of Alta, and he's committed now for the Alta project. So We'll have more, but we just didn't work today.
Very good. All right, well, thanks. That's too bad he had to slip away. That was, I'm
Yes.
looking forward to that. So we'll table that for the next meeting and
John,
yes,
are you gonna, is that the end of the discussion on dark sky?
we can, go ahead, John or John.
I was just going to say, the only thing that I was saying is that Daniel Mendoza's gone. We did some assessments, and sadly, the assessments we did were ground only. The drone did continuous light assessments from ground level up to 15 meters above. And it's sad that we didn't get those, but now we have a delay. I don't know if we were able to get those again in the future, but the only thing I was saying is that we lost Daniel for today, but he's got some input and he's got some data. We'll get him back later, but no, we can talk about this if it's okay with you.
We could, Roger, we could table this entire discussion till Daniel's back and next time we meet and have a more robust, less time, more informed discussion next time. But if there's some things you want to bring up now, by all means.
Let me just say something quick. Some of the entities in town, the ski lifts, the Alta Lodge, the Rustler and Snowpine, they run their outside lights, whether they're open for business or not. And it was quite evident last spring when everything was shut down, but all the lights were on. So, I mean, some lighting is needed for public safety purposes, it's clear. But we might consider a rule, an ordinance that says when you're not in business, the only lights you can run are those that are for clear public safety purposes. And it would at least give us a darker environment in some periods of the year, particularly in the shoulder seasons, that won't work for everything, but it works a little bit. So I just want to throw that thought in.
Well, and that's a good thought. And then just to get everybody thinking along those same lines, that's what me and everybody else hears when you start talking about dark skies. Everybody says, oh, I have to have this spotlight for public safety and for, to protect my property from vandals and burglars. It's like, it doesn't really work like that. I mean, we changed our lights so that they're shielded and they point down. So it still illuminates the building. It just doesn't go into the sky and into the street. So you can still have public safety and emergency lighting without blinding your neighbors and going into the sky. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions about this whole dark sky thing. It's people don't want to give up their spotlights and their bright lights, but they don't really help, those lights.
I think we talked about that a couple of years ago when we had our support from the state office. And I'm sure we can talk more about those concepts the next time when we have time for Mr. Mendoza to speak with us about that. So if everybody's okay, we'll put that number 2 agenda item next time we get together, and we'll have some more time and have a more relaxed discussion with him, and anxious to hear what he has to say. Let's move on to agenda item number 5, the amending chapter 13 to talk about ski area directional signage.
So
and
this
John,
is,
I'll turn it to you.
yes, thank you. So this is almost like just an introductory right now, because it's been 6 months since we've met and we've been dealing with amending all of the whole ordinance package that we worked on for years. One of the parts of the ordinance package was the Albion Basin Protection Overlay Zone, which had a building permit requirement and a larger setback from waterways for everything in the upper Albion Basin Protection Overlay Zone, which is basically the Albion Basin. The ski area was disturbed because there are certain items that were structures, not occupied buildings or buildings, that they customarily would get exemptions from the Forest Service and Salt Lake City Public Utilities and the Health Department, and they wouldn't have to get a building permit. Well, things like picnic tables and fences and gates and signs. And while we were talking about that, they wanted the same exemption for their ski area operations for everything throughout town, not just the Albion Basin Protection Overlay Zone, and not just on the exemptions apply only to forest or forest service property. They wanted this for everything, including their own private property. And we just couldn't get there because you all never looked at it. When we were talking about these things, we were looking at, Forest Service issues and overlapping jurisdictions between Forest Service, public utilities, health department, state water quality, and things like that. So one of the things that Cliff had been talking with Mike Mon and proposed that we would offer this to help out the ski area to amend the sign ordinance so that the ski area would not have to go through a permitting process, and they could get exemptions so long as everybody else approved it. And we knew about it and we were informed about it before they did any site prep or before they did any actual construction. They could have exemptions for their signs. So this would be an amendment to the sign ordinance. We threw in the caveat that this wouldn't count for, lit signs, advertising signs. We'll identify this better when we come back. And nothing on the SR 210 bypass road or right of way. So just a heads up, this is coming. We'll have to have a public hearing, just like we did with the entire zoning ordinance. Public hearing before you take comments and then make a recommendation to the town council, then they can change the land use ordinances however you suggest and however they want. But just a heads up. And then one of the things I was going to talk about today is with this public hearing, I don't know if you want to do this next month, next meeting, or we can talk about that when we decide when we're going to meet next. But so just an intro to what we'll be looking at with the proposed sign changes. It will require a public hearing. And the only thing that you will need to do today is figure out if you want to do that next month or the month after or whenever.
I've got a couple of questions real quick on that. So,
yes.
So let's say we just amend that now. What are the controls for the sign for the sign placements, and do they still come back to you, to the town, for make sure there's compliance with look, feel, location, quantity? I mean, what's to stop sign litter, for example?
That's kind of the scary thing. I mean, we can put in there the quantity is what makes me a little nervous. I mean, if we say, okay, we'll exempt you for ski area directional signs that are not lit, that are under 10 feet high, that are under 32 square feet, that are not on the road or the right of way. But that's a very good point. Does that mean
10 feet? Yeah, but not quantity. It could be.
Yeah, there's nothing addressing quantity yet. Thank you. That's a very good point.
Yeah, and then 10 feet from where? Top average snow, top of snow load, or 10 feet
well,
from base?
the way we measure things. Oh, that's interesting. The way we measure things, and I guess we'd point this out. We'd have to point this out. That's why Polly's still here. We start at the ground at the lowest level. So if the sign's on a slant, you start at the lowest level adjacent to the sign, you go up 10 feet, and that's that. And that's just a suggestion, so it could be 8 feet. It could be, whatever you want, but the discussion, we're going to start that discussion. And the quantity and the size and height are big.
I don't know about everybody else, but since we're going to start that discussion, I'm not sure I'm quite ready for a hearing on that next time we meet versus let's chew, if you don't mind, John, my preference is to chew on this, have a more robust discussion with the language, et cetera, and make sure we're not opening floodgates to sign litter.
Can I make a suggestion? Because
Sure.
I think that, public hearings should be viewed as informational, right? So that you can get input from the community about this type of thing. So I don't think that there's any downside to, even while you're still kind of working through it or working through whether it's something that you would recommend or not, to get the input from the public at that same time could help kind of focus your discussion and or give you some input on things that you hadn't thought about or.
No, I agree. I'm just, do we know enough to even have the meeting, I guess is what I'm saying. We, meaning the commission, even to even.
Well,
I hear what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying, Paul. I don't, do we all feel comfortable going going forward.
John would provide for you the background and the information you would need, I would think.
Yep.
Okay.
And now I know I have, there's a lot more work to do, but the quantity thing is a big issue.
Anybody else thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly don't feel that we're anywhere close to having a public hearing, even though it's informational, as Polly suggests. I mean, we ought to have a lot better handle on this ourselves before we go out. I mean, I see some inconsistencies already. The John Goldner sent us something to talk about one of the town council members had suggested that a 16 square foot sign should be exempt, and yet the ordinance talks about a 32 square foot sign, for instance. And the implications on how we can exempt one entity for these things and not exempt others, to me, is kind of iffy. I mean, I'd like to understand that a lot better. It's also kind of gives ASL a carte blanche, which I'm not sure that's a precedent we want to establish. So, and as far as I can tell, there's no means for watershed protection or other concerns of public interest in this. I mean, we're saying, okay, do whatever you want, just don't screw it up. And I'm not sure that's our best shot.
And these are the exact discussions and considerations when we were talking about potential exemptions in the upper Albion Basin Protection Overlay Zone on Forest Service property only. So exemptions would happen or could happen if the proposed exemption was approved by the Forest Service and any other relevant agency like Salt Lake City Public Utilities, the Health Department, or the State Stream. And Jeff would know, I can't remember the name of the State Stream, State Water Division, but they wouldn't happen automatically. Oh, and it wasn't the council member. The council member was just taking what didn't get through the zoning amendment process for the ski area and bringing that up as a future possibility. And our sign ordinance says 32 square feet. I thought if we're going to be exempting things, it was my idea to throw in 16 square feet because it seems more in line with the signs they have, and it would have been something we'd discuss anyway. So it's just a starting point.
Okay, all right.
I'll get beat up on that, not the council member.
Jeff, you had something?
Yeah, I guess, I kind of agree that I don't feel ready to engage the public yet on an issue that I don't begin to even have a good understanding of yet, all the nuances of. So I would appreciate having a more robust discussion just at a regular planning commission meeting where we can get our thoughts together on our concerns and then invite, the public in to share their thoughts and concerns and then consolidate those into a recommendation.
Yeah, I think most of, that's where I am too. Rob or Dave?
I agree. I think looking at the existing sign ordinance is important and see what that says. I just breezed through it quickly, but I think I need more primer. And then I guess I wasn't sure I followed what John Goldner was saying about the Forest Service ground versus private property in the town and what are the considerations as we're thinking about that?
Okay, I think it's, yeah. And John, I'm not sure we need to respond. Let's maybe this table, let's have a more comprehensive discussion next time is where it's sounding. But Rob, I want you to weigh in too.
Well, I mean, is sign litter that much of an issue with the lift company? I mean,
Not yet.
I just don't see those guys wanting to litter up the place with signs. I think they would be amenable to keeping the signs down to a limited height and limited square footage. I don't think that's my impression of the lift company.
No, I wasn't implying that they would go hog wild. They're just more, we need to just have our eyes more wide open than they already are. So that's all.
And I agree with Roger that you really, are we going to exempt one, but not the other, not anybody else? Is that how we're doing business? I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. So John and Chris, let's again, I guess it looks like another agenda item for next time, just a more, just prep us a little bit more, please, next time. And I don't anticipate a lot of back and forth, but I think we just all need to know. I think we're just not there yet in terms of level of comfort. I'm sure we will be soon, and don't want to draw this out, but let's table that. Is that okay?
Great, that's perfect. Thank you. And that's why the very meager intro, just to get a read on which way you want to go.
Sure. Okay. And
I got the read.
All right. Thank you. All right. Good. Well, moving on to agenda item number 6, discussion of addressing climate change and the potential impacts to the town and who we are and economics and the physical part of it. A lot of things there. And Roger, I know we've talked about this a little bit in the past, and so I'm going to turn it over to you to give us your additional thoughts on things we've already discussed in the past.
Okay. Well, I mean, first of all, it's obvious that we should all do our individual and collective parts to reduce the impacts of climate change, which is mainly by just curtailing our greenhouse gas emissions. And it's pleasing to see that idea is getting worked into things like what we just saw from Jared et al. They are very sensitive to this. But whatever we do individually, climate change is happening, and its effects are growing steadily. I mean, I was aware of the science of this sometime in the 80s or 90s. And there's a guy who was the head of the NASA Goddard Institute of Space Studies in New York, whose name is Jim, and I can't get his last name right now, who was really making a lot of noise about this, and not very many people.
Jim Hanson.
Hanson, that's it. Jim Hanson, yes. And he was rather ignored, yet as far as I could tell, all of his forecasts were pretty darn right on, and were understatements of what the underprojections of what the impacts have really been. So, I mean, we might collectively be able to slow it a bit, but it's going to overtake us in the not too distant future. And we need to figure out what we are going to do with climate change effects on what those effects will be on our town, and start thinking about how we're going to prepare for them. I think it's going to change the business mix considerably, and it's going to shorten the ski season. I mean, in the 20 years I've lived here, we've effectively lost Thanksgiving as a ski time. Okay, what are we going to lose next? Christmas? And it was raining on the last day of the ski season last Sunday, rain and snow. So, I mean, those are just a microcosm of the effects. But what I'd like to see first is a presentation by an expert or experts on the expected changes to the local region that are more confined to where we are, and that what we might expect over the next 30 years with some error bounds on them, or at least ranges of those things. And then we can move on to assess what the effects on our community will be. And after that, we might start to think about how we're going to respond to those. But my feeling is, let's start with some facts. And there are experts out there and I'm sure John Goldner knows them, or maybe Jeff knows them, that we could engage to come give us a primer on this topic. So my suggestion is that at our next meeting, which I hope is not in 6 months, but maybe 2 months, that we get a data dump along those lines to get started.
Okay, yeah, there's a climatologist out of or meteorologist out of Utah State who I know has worked here specifically in the Wasatch, who was part of the I think he was engaged during the early parts of the Accord process. And Jeff, maybe you know who I'm talking about. I can go back to my notes and find out who that is. But we could certainly reach out to someone at the National Weather Service, or I think there's someone at Utah State. I like the idea of let's get a baseline of information and have a presentation about that. So Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a Utah State guy, their climate change center up there is Rob Gillies. Used to be. I'm not sure if he's retired or still engaged. And there's another guy by the name of Court Nelson or Nielsen at the University of Utah that's done a lot of downscaling of modeling and how it, impacts the specific Wasatch Range. So I can get those names, John, or
great.
So they did studies for Salt Lake City looking at water supply.
Yeah, I know in early parts of the Accord process, I know we had some folks that were talking, I think it was the guy from Utah State. And I know this is not a news flash to those in the Park City area, but I think the soundbite is Park City won't be a ski area by the next 80 years or so. And Roger, to your point, I think what you're also bringing up is what are the economic consequences? Is Alta going to be more concentrated in terms of visitation? Is fewer choices of those who want to do winter recreation, and ergo greater concentration of visitation with all those, as they say, negative externalities, in other words, impacts, or that's just one of many items I think that would be of interest to us as a commission.
Well, if I could just add, one of the other big changes is going to be with the investments that have been made into infrastructure and buildings, and owners wanting to see a return on that investment, you're going to see a move to more of a 4-season model as opposed to just more of a winter model. And so what impacts is that going to have on the town of Alta?
Well, I think every resort community in the West is really a 4-season economic model, with maybe the exception of us. You name it. In fact, visitation's higher in the summer, and it's just like here in a microcosm. People getting out of the heat. Lake Tahoe is much busier in the summer than it is in the winter, for example, these days, and that's even Park City, Steamboat, Jackson, you name them, they're all busier now in the summer. Is that driven by getting out of the heat of the cities, or simply the price of skiing? We don't really know that, but let's get some facts. To your point, Roger.
Right. And we're going to see some events that are kind of off scale. We've in the last 3 years we've had 2 really interesting events. One was the 60-hour event of this winter, and the other was the blowout down by Lisa Falls. These are the kinds of extreme weather events that the models indicate. You never can get them in detail, but you can get them in general, that the frequency and intensity of these kinds of things are both going to go up.
Right. Well, here in the Valley, of course, we had the hurricane in September 8th, whatever that was. So that was unprecedented. Anyway, it was pretty crazy. All right, let's agree to try to get a presentation next time we meet on start there. And then we'll see where that goes. Now, we did have that, remember, was it 2 years ago? We had it had to have been 2 years ago. We did talk about evacuation and fire. Remember, we had the UPD, or not UPD, but the Unified Fire up. And I thought that was very informative. That was just, I think we just scratched the surface though with that discussion and those site visits to the buildings. I think all of us were involved, just about all of us were involved in that. And that was very, very informative too. But let's start at the macro level and see what falls into our bucket of responsibilities too. Okay, good.
Very good. Yes, thank you.
Anything else on agenda item 6? If not, we'll move on. Any new business anybody wants to bring forward? Meeting schedule, date of next meeting. Let's talk about that a little bit. So we have one scheduled in May. We've got some 2.5 kind of agenda items that are going to take a little bit of time, and maybe turn to John and Chris if we have time to well, first we have to schedule with Mr. Mendoza, then we have to give you time to help inform us on the sign issues. Then we need to find the right person to come and speak with us, who's willing to do it with his schedule, et cetera, et cetera. So part of me thinks that, is May pushing it for those as far as at the staff side of things, or should we delay till June? I'm good either way. I just want to make sure that we're giving you all time to get things ready. Because if we go to May, we're scheduled what, Chris? What are we? The
25th?
25.
Which is also the week. Well, no, that's the week before Memorial Day.
I think my own feeling, while I'm not a staffer, then May is kind of pushing it, given it's the number of things.
That's kind of what I'm getting at too, Roger. I wouldn't mind going until June. And
you guys are the best.
Pardon?
You guys are the best.
Yeah, let's go to June, and then along those lines, we can discuss further. We don't need commitments and don't need to make anybody uncomfortable, but maybe we open up the windows and meet in person upstairs, or better yet, meet outside at a nice picnic table, at a table area. I'm comfortable, but I don't want to force my comfort on anyone else either. So that's something we can talk about maybe a couple weeks ahead of time in early June. But just I'm good now with in person. But again, that's just me, and I know can be a sensitive topic.
Yeah,
I don't know how to handle that, John. Do we do a poll? A poll, not a poll, but do you call?
You could just let Chris or I know.
Yeah.
June would look like, if it's the 4th Tuesday, the first Tuesday in June is June 1st. But so we'd be looking at June 22nd, and who knows what's going to happen between now and then. Hopefully it only gets better. So between now and the next little while, just let one of us know if you're up for an on-site meeting. We can open up the community center, or I don't know I don't know quite what we're doing with the park yet and our picnic tables, and the campground won't be melted out, so we won't be able to use their picnic tables. But just think about it and let me or Chris know if you're up for an in-person.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think it's important to let staff know, so we can all plan accordingly. But I would look forward.
We won't tell. We could say 3 to 2 or whatever.
Yeah, I think if any person doesn't feel comfortable, it should continue to be Zoom for at least 1 or 2 more meetings.
We're not going to impose anything, and I don't want to do that at all. So,
The other thing, if we're going to invite either of these two experts to the meeting, they're going to want to be able to present PowerPoint type presentations. So an outdoor meeting makes
Oh,
that
yeah.
challenging.
Yeah.
Right.
But whatever we do,
Thank you.
it
Good
needs to
point.
be in, it needs to be in compliance with whatever the county or state
Yeah,
guidelines are.
yeah, whatever the guidelines are at that time.
Right.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so it looks like we're gonna meet in June. Is, for those of us who are still slaving away at the office, I just want to throw this idea out there. And maybe in a couple of years I won't be, but you never know, the way things are going with young kids. But we could start, I thought we had started in the past years, we'd started at 4 o'clock, just so it doesn't eat into the Dave, the billable business day that Dave and I are slaves to. So I'm just throwing it out there as a 4 o'clock start, especially with daylight savings time in the summertime. That takes us to 6 o'clock. Generally, I'm not saying I'd like to do that. I'm just throwing it out there for discussion. Although I shouldn't say I wouldn't like to do that. It's certainly, I'm 60% there as far as desiring to start at 4 o'clock instead of 3. But 3 o'clock, I certainly can live with 3 too. It's up to everybody else.
I can do either. Either
Me
works for
too.
me.
Yeah, either way is okay with me.
Yep.
John, I
that'll
can
work,
make either
work for me.
either
as
work
well.
for me, for Dave.
Dave, you're okay?
Yeah,
Either way?
I know what you're saying, but I do like that it gets over earlier, and
That's
there's
true.
plenty of other planning commissions that go start at whatever 7 and we go till midnight on other towns. So we don't need to torture people like that around here.
Are you sure? Torturing's kind of, no, okay. Yeah, I've got to dial into a Moab meeting tonight, and who knows how long that'll last. So I hear you. Okay, all right. We'll just stick with 3 o'clock for now. That Chris, we'll just stick with the time. It's on our calendars. So we'll meet in June, ideally in person, but again, circle back with staff as much as possible. With that, 2 minutes to spare before 5 o'clock. Anything else anybody would like to air out, bring up? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll just a comment to John. I'll try and get you 2 phone numbers for Rob Gillies up at Utah State, and the other guy is Court Strong at the University of Utah.
Great, thank you.
So, anybody
Well,
like to make a-
I'll move to adjourn.
Rob, is there a second?
I'd second.
Very good. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, great. Thanks,
Very
everybody. Great to
Nice
see everybody.
Thanks.
All this
Yeah.
time.
Good to
Thank
see you.
We'll be in touch.
Good night.
Definitely.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
So-